logged in here, and we're going to start promptly at 7. If anybody has something that's really on their mind, they want to make sure that the panelists hear about, or can maybe know what your interest is so we can incorporate as we go along, feel free to use the chat function. Hover your cursor over the images, and you'll see a line of options down below, and one of them says chat. If you click on that, then it'll open a window and you can type your messages in there. We'll go over all that again as we get more attendees in. If you get kicked off and can't get back in, don't panic. It's going to be on the Facebook page. We've got a lot of attendees. We have a big system. We bought the large Zoom package, so we can get a lot of folks in here. But if you have trouble, don't panic. We'll get it up on Facebook in real time, so you can just go over to the Rural Caucus page and see it there too. And Jackie Steiber-Cordone is going to be sitting in the background watching those Facebook pieces as well. So we'll be having somebody, if you put comments on Facebook, we should be able to see those comments over here eventually. So we'll just give folks a chance to get logged in and give our panelists time to sit here and look nervous. Not this crowd. This crowd's been in front of some rough crowds. This is friendly fire, I'm hoping. Yeah, more people are still logging in. That's great. I'm just going to pull up a piece over here.
Oh yeah, nice group of folks. So Glenn, do you recommend that we mute ourselves as each one of us speaks? Probably it's the best.
Yeah. I think as we as panelists, we'll just mute ourselves.
Okay.
And then if my hair combing technique doesn't work, I'll unmute myself and cough or something.
Or you'll mute us.
I'll mute you. Right? I don't foresee that happening. This is just gonna. I'm so excited for what we're about to do. We're almost at the top of the hour, and like I said, we've got a few folks who are still logging in, so we'll let them get logged in, and then we'll get right to work. There we go. I'm just moving. If you see me looking around the screen, I'm just moving some of my notes around here. All right, so I'm gonna just run down our list here. I see we've got about 20 folks who have signed on. And we have people that tend to log in after the hour. So we're gonna go ahead and get started out of respect for everybody's time, those of you all who are on time. So grateful to see so many new faces as I look through the attendee list here. We've got a lot of folks who I think it's their first time attending one of these rural forums through Zoom. And we're just incredibly grateful for you willingly spending time with us. I want to start out by giving a thank you to our organizers who really put together the whole rural forum idea that we've been using the last few months. And that's Jackie Steiber-Cordone, who is also kind of running our tech behind the scenes today. Judy Kading and Vicki Rossander, who've all just dedicated a lot of time and energy to making sure that these got put together nicely. They helped us put together a grant application through the IDP to pay for these events. So they're just phenomenal Democrats, and just again thank them all for that. A little Zoom courtesy for those who haven't Zoomed a whole lot. So we can make you feel comfortable. If you're having a desire to chat with us, we're actually in a separate room from you, so we can't see all of your faces, but you do have a function. If you float the cursor over the image in the middle of the page, you'll see a little line of options along the bottom of the screen. One of them says mute, stop video, and one of them says chat. And if you click on chat, it allows you to type a message in there that will come to us, and we'll be able to incorporate your questions into the discussion or your comments into the discussion if possible. We're going to be a little pressed for time today, so we'll probably save all questions for at the very end. These rural caucus forums are put together for a very specific reason. Our reason is to provide insight into issues pertinent to rural Iowans so that you can have discussions with your neighbors about why they should be voting blue in this upcoming election. We want to arm you with the tools to persuade people to vote with you. We also want this to be a dialogue, which is why we want to use that chat function, because we want to take what's pertinent to rural Iowans back to the Iowa Democratic Party and use that to shape the party platform and party decisions as we go forward. So this is a really useful tool for that, and we're so grateful for those of you who are taking time to share it with us. We have another upcoming event in November. That'll be our next forum. It'll actually be after the election. We're going to do a veterans event with the Veterans Caucus. We have a few county veteran service officers and veterans who are going to be online sharing with us and taking questions. So I encourage you to look for that event. We haven't picked the date. It'll be the 10th or the 11th, but we really want to see everybody there as well. So with that, I don't want to take up a whole lot more time just talking about what the rural caucus does. I want to get us started on the forum as if your life depends on it, and that's an incredibly literal term today. Our very lives depend on what happens in this election. I'm going to speak briefly about healthcare. We have Denise O'Brien, who's going to speak about ag and food. We'll have Pat Shipley then speak about education and labor, and then John Norris is going to wrap everything up for us. I'm going to start out as the medical expert. I'm a family practice physician in Minden, Iowa, which is in the western part of Iowa. I practice in a small clinic and at 4 nursing homes around the county of Potawatomi County. Potawatomi County is the second largest county in the state in terms of land mass. We have one of the largest cities in the state as well, in the top 10 cities, Council Bluffs. So we're a little mix of rural and urban, and I practice all throughout the county. I've been a rural healthcare advocate since before I went to medical school. I started out as in the planning department for Methodist Health System, helping put physicians in rural clinics around Nebraska and Iowa. I worked throughout the change over to critical access hospitals and helping those facilities form mentorship relationships and go through that process of converting to critical access. So I've seen healthcare from the administrative side and from the provider side. I work very closely with hospitals, with nursing homes, with a hospice as well. So that's kind of where my expertise comes from, is really hands-on in the healthcare field. What I want to stress is that I believe that the function of this caucus is really greater than what we've talked about for carrying the voice to and from Iowans about issues that are important to rural Iowa. This caucus is about saving the very existence of rural Iowa. And I believe that the very existence of rural Iowa is being threatened by the topics that we're going to talk about today, and by the neglect happening with the topics today, or the direct attack on these areas. The direct attacks on healthcare are incredibly pertinent to rural Iowa. There are certain pillars which rural communities are built on. And if you're going to have a community that grows in the rural setting, there's a few things you absolutely have to have. You have to have decent schools. you have to have access to services like medical services and food. And you have to have a robust, vibrant agricultural community surrounding your small towns that all layer together to make your community an attractive place for new people to come or for people to stay and live. These areas also provide the basis for the economy of rural communities. So if we're not focusing on protecting the areas we're going to talk about tonight, our rural communities are going to die. And we're seeing that happen. We see almost zero growth in most rural communities that aren't in almost direct proximity to a large town. My own community, the town of Minden, is 599 people. We went up from 548 people about 10 years ago, and had been dropping steadily before that. So we had a little bump, but we're like most other communities. We're stagnant, and there are many other small communities where it's dying. My community is incredibly interesting. We have a pharmacy, we have a dentist, and we have a doctor and a grocery store in a town of 600 people. For those of you in rural communities, you know that is unheard of. It's just a holdover from better times in reality. I stumbled upon this community and decided to make it my home. Had that not happened, the pharmacy was closing the week I opened, and the grocery store was failing. So having access to those services has really helped us just keep our head above water. But there are so many other services that we've got to pay attention to in our community. But I really want to talk about that physician service. We have a big loss facing that's about to face us, and that loss is providers. Okay, I'm going to show you a little slide here. When we look at the number of healthcare providers in Iowa, the dark blue are areas that are the entire county is a healthcare professional shortage area for primary care. So your general family practitioner, like myself, the entire county is considered a healthcare shortage area. If you look on that map, if you look on the left side there and go down, the dark blue on the edge of that map is me. That's Potawatomi County, the darkest blue on the west side. And I am the only rural provider that lives in the rural community in Potawatomi County. We have 2 major hospitals in Council Bluffs, but we are still considered a primary care health professional shortage area. Look across the rest of the state. Almost every county in the state is considered a partial shortage area. Some part of that county is underserved in basic primary care. I wish I could show you a better slide, but let's talk about dental care. When you put dental in there, you see almost the entire state turn dark blue. More than 75% of the state is missing basic dental care, which is incredibly important for development, growth, comfort, safety. It should be a top of our list area that we should be defining. And then, of course, the last slide I'm going to show you is one that you all know. If it's not depressing enough, there's your mental health professional shortage areas in the state of Iowa. We are lacking professionals in all of these areas, and it's our rural communities that are really the dark blue on every single one of those. So we've got to address the professionals that are available to serve in those communities. We've got to vote for people at the state level who are going to prioritize primary care, dental, and mental health. We have not seen that happen in the current administration. What we see are more clinics closing, we see less money available for services, and we see less attractive opportunities in those communities. And what makes it unattractive? So as a primary care provider, what would be attractive for a rural community? Well, what makes a rural community attractive are places to practice, like hospitals and nursing homes. We have been on a decline in the number of hospitals in our state as well. We've seen the number of hospital beds between 2015 and 2019. The number of hospitals, not just beds, the number of rural hospitals went down by 13 hospitals. We're seeing the same process with rural nursing homes. Nursing home after nursing home after nursing home closes. And that's where providers in rural communities work. In order to make a practice like mine happen, I told you, I work at 4 county nursing homes. Without those nursing homes, our clinic would have closed with COVID, and we'll get to COVID briefly. But without those nursing homes, our clinic would have closed. And I have to work at 4 of them to make that happen, and I'm the only rural provider in my county. Rural hospitals provide options like places to do colon cancer screening, colonoscopies, places to do simple surgical procedures, and obstetrics. And what we're seeing is rural hospitals are giving up obstetrics, delivering babies. Delivering babies and having babies in your clinic is how you make a clinic thrive and continue to grow. Without babies, your population ages and ages and ages, and eventually there's no one for you to see. So your community needs that as well. You need those children coming in and taking the place of your graduating seniors who are going off to college. And you need to have families that want to raise their children in your community, and access to the healthcare, basic wellness care is a priority for families that look at rural communities. When you talk to a family who's looking to move to your community, what do they ask about? They ask, how far is it to the hospital and the doctor? And what are the schools like? About a month after they're there, they say, gee, it would be great if we had a grocery store in this community as well. But that's absolutely an incredibly important part of rural survival. So we've got to help our hospitals thrive. And what we need are elected officials who are going to help take these small rural hospitals and apply better payer mix opportunities for those communities. So, and what I'm talking about when I say that, it kind of got word salad there. What I'm talking about is rural hospitals in Iowa, about 60% of their income comes from Medicare. And if Medicare is paying at a rate that is far lower than private insurance, and it is a high utilizer. These are usually seniors, older people, high utilizer of services. So it's very expensive to take care of Medicare patients, and we're not seeing an incentive from our elected officials to make sure that rural hospitals are paid for that kind of differential of how much work they have to do to take care of these individuals. According to the Iowa Hospital Association, the average operating margin of our critical access hospitals between 2017 and 2018 was a negative 2.7%. Okay, so as a result of that, that's why our hospitals are cutting services such as obstetrics, such as minor surgery. We see kind of the same thing happening with our rural nursing homes. They operate at a 1% margin, and they're predominantly paid for by Medicaid. So Medicaid is we can get all upset about the managed care organizations that are running Medicaid, but their problem is really management of the system. They aren't setting the rates. The rates are set by your elected officials at the state and the state bureaucracy. And if they are not pushing higher reimbursement for Medicaid patients, those nursing homes are going to fail. Why does it matter if your nursing home fails in your community? Again, it's going to be loss of your medical providers, that front line, but it's also loss of jobs in your community. Our nursing homes and hospitals are the biggest employers in most of the counties where they exist. So that's incredibly important. How bad is the payment problem? It's $10,000, or I'm sorry, $11,000 per year per patient in the nursing home, less than the actual cost of taking care of that patient. So we need to be electing officials that are motivated to fund Medicaid fully, fund the care of these patients fully, so that our communities survive. I've gone my 10 minutes here, so I'm gonna stop myself. But I want to add one thing about COVID, and that thing about COVID is that this has unmasked the problem of healthcare in rural Iowa. These problems aren't because of COVID. These problems have really been revealed by COVID. And we can talk more about how that's happened if we have some time at the end. But I really encourage you to vote for individuals who are focused on providing for rural healthcare in Iowa. Joni Ernst voted against it when she voted against the Affordable Care Act and voted to repeal without a replacement. David Young did the same thing after lying to all of you and telling you that he was going to vote for it. So I certainly would recommend that you look at your candidates closely and pick candidates that are truly focused on the health and well-being of our state, and especially the rural part of it. I'm gonna now introduce you to our next speaker, and that is Denise O'Brien. Denise is the owner-operator of Rolling Hills Farms, which is an organic farm in Cass County, Iowa. She's been an activist in agriculture and food policy before the farm crisis of the 1980s. You might recognize some of the individuals who stood on stage with her at Farm Aid, Willie Nelson and John Mellencamp. Or you might know her from her recent run for House District 21 in the 2018 cycle. In 2006, she also ran for Secretary of Ag for the state of Iowa. And she is a sought-after endorsement that draws political activists and candidates right to her farm on a regular basis. Denise is a warrior for rural Iowa, and I give you Denise O'Brien.
Oh, that's much too. You make me feel very humbled, Glenn. Thank you for that introduction. I've just been around a long time. So, when you start farming 45 years ago and you meet this guy who says, I want to be an organic farmer, and it starts from there and you don't know where it's going to go. It's been a really incredible journey. And I ponder it a lot. It's like, have I really done anything to change things? And in that 40 some years, and John's been around that long too. We worked on the Iowa Farm Unity Coalition together, and gosh darn it, we just have to take back our agriculture. We have to take it back from corporate agribusiness. It's just that the whole setup is an extractive economy. We suck out the resources from the soil. We don't replenish it with anything. We just and they move on. And in the 80s, people began to understand what it was like to be a third world country where you don't have any added value. You take out all of the resources, ours being the soil, and don't replace it with anything. You just kill it until it's all gone, and then you move on to the next place. And unfortunately, that's been our policy, and we have to change that. And we need to grow food for Iowans, not commodities. And at least once a week on Twitter, I respond to Joni Ernst and Chuck Grassley that we don't grow food in Iowa. We grow commodities for ethanol and for livestock. We don't. 95% of our food is imported into our state. And I'm a food grower. Larry and I dreamed about growing food in the early 80s when we started farming in the late 70s. And we put in raspberries and asparagus and apples and strawberries and started then and milk cows and did rotational grazing. And as Larry's mom said, we were always ahead of our time. She was our biggest cheerleader, and that just, we knew in our guts what was right. And we read people like Wendell Berry, and we participated in many things over the years when the farm crisis evolved. And so what we have to do, and what is out there with a number of people, I don't think Biden is quite there yet, but I think he can be convinced to be there, is that we need a new Green Deal. And we need to have what Henry A. Wallace put forth and that we have to grow crops that return a profit to farmers, and that profit is used for living and for being able to take care of the equipment. When we started farming, I think it was corn was $3 a bushel then. It's $3 a bushel now. And that is just not right after 45 years. It's just, and what we have are all these try to fix it type of things, So what do we have now? We have heavily subsidized crop insurance. So there's not a big risk to the farmers. And we as taxpayers are helping them helping them ease that risk. But, one of the ways that we've been farming with food is that we've had a community supported agriculture farm. And the way that we share the risk with our customers is that they buy a share in the farm and they share the risk. They give us money up front, and we can buy seed and fertilizer, equipment, whatever we need. And then they get what we grow and throughout a whole season. And it's a very reasonable exchange. It creates community. And that's the kind of thing that we need to emphasize, that and cooperatives. I've seen a number of articles talking about, given the vulnerability of our food system, which we've all seen happen since March, when it's just fallen apart, and the whole system it's negative to all the people within the system, to the farmer, to the animal, to the farm workers in the fields, to the workers in the COVID-ridden meatpacking plants. There's no justice in any of this along the way. It is only for corporate profit, and it's just and the margins are so small for farmers and for people working in the food system, that we are all having to be looking at this as a justice issue, that we can spread the risk, and we can have people make a living. We can, at farming, make a living at being in the processing industry, and that consumers can have a good, healthy diet. Because we all know by now, many of us have seen all of these, the King Corn, the movie King Corn, that's about, corn and the fructose, high fructose. There's just so much evidence that our diet has caused us incredible health issues because of the processing of the food that we've been eating. We've gotten away from good, solid, healthy food to, going up and down the aisles of the grocery store and buying things that take 5 minutes to cook. And in that 5 minutes where we've got sugar and we've got flour, we've got all these things. And I have never, ever seen so many food allergies in that. In all my years of being a farmer and being a mother and being a grandmother, have I ever seen such food issues come up. And it's because of the highly processed foods that we're putting in our bodies. So we need to free Iowa from the corporate structure. We need supply management. Supply management we've talked about for a while. We need to consider how much we need to grow, and then we need to grow according to what we need, what the demand is. And if we want to grow more, we can sell that on the market. It's not going to restrict us from what to grow or how much we grow, but there is that if we grow what we need and have a farmer reserve, which is really important for natural disasters and things, we just, we overproduce, and that's what's caused us problems, over the overproduction of things. So we need to restructure ag so we can make room for new people coming into agriculture. Larry and I have had interns through our farm, and many people have decided, oh, hey, no, they don't want to farm because it's really, really hard work. And others that are just captured by the soil, captured by the land, and they don't have access to land. You have to be born into land if you're going to be farming. And so there's organizations around Iowa like SILT that will help farmers get started without the capitalization of land, but there's not enough of that. We need to have really strong policy that will help young farmers, not only young farmers, get into farming. Iowa has become, and we know this daily, we have become a sacrifice area for the corporations. And this is going back to the extractive economy. We've ruined our water. We've made our soil unhealthy, and we've ruined our air. We have pesticides. We have the horrible, we've got high rates of cancer and Parkinson's disease, and those are things that come with abusing the land and the domination of the land, not working with Mother Nature. And I see Barb asked about how we work on vertical integration. I think we have to form co-ops. That's what I started to say, actually, and I got on a tangent, but I've seen places around the country where farmers and ranchers are getting together and forming cooperatives. So we have to do things where it's employee owned, it's farmer owned. And we've had those examples in the past, but they haven't always worked the best. They've turned into corporate structures that don't really meet the needs of the people. So I think there's ways of tearing down the vertical integration, but it's also we have to work with the banking industry, because the banking industry in the 80s helped set up the vertical integration. If farmers wanted to raise hogs or to be in farming, they had to have a contract and their hogs pre-sold, basically. And that's what helped set up that vertical integration. And Barb, you know the answer to that question, or you have ideas about the answer to that question, if anybody does. So I think that, historically, we've had some really good programs. When you were talking, Glenn, about restructuring, or getting physicians and dentists out into the rural areas, I'll end with this. I really think at this time in our country, given the high unemployment, given everything that's just up in the air with everything, we need a national core of people going out to do the farming, to reduce debt with their, help pay for their schooling, to have access to land. We need a program that will incorporate putting people out into those jobs, and that we're always going to need to eat 3 times a day. We're really lucky in this country. I'm really lucky where I live is that I get 3 meals a day or more. And most, right in our own town, we have people that are food insecure, and we have a lot of issues to address, and we can do it by looking at the core problems of what we have as an extractive economy in Iowa. And I believe my time is up, right, Glenn?
You did great, Denise. Thank you so much. You emphasized something that I wish I had meant to start with it, and I just, I got excited about healthcare. You mentioned climate and Green New Deal, and I just want to emphasize the imperative that all of the things that we talk about today are really built on the concept of their impact on the environment, how we impact the environment as we implement these different things, and how the environment can be improved, and environmental services can be improved, thus improving health, thus improving agriculture. There was a question that you might want to pass on that was, about ag leaders. Who are the ag leaders that are out there that are going to step up in the wings and carry this message to Joe Biden presidency? Are there people who have his ear? And maybe that's a question for John to think about as we come to you at the end. But
well, I would like to say to that, it would be John Norris, in my opinion. And and I think that, and I wouldn't mind helping him on that, actually. But and I just, one thing I want to mention too, I saw Barb had we need a new Homestead Act. We need to redistribute. There's a way we have to think about, and I think about this just about weekly, and that is that I am farming land that was stolen from people who were the original people here. There are things that we have to deal with as a society about what we did to build this agriculture community on, and that's slavery, and that's genocide of the Native American population, the indigenous peoples, and that all of this, we can't ignore that as we look to build a new system.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you so much, Denise.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. And hang around with us. So if we have any questions at the end, we can do some questions. Next, I'm going to move us on to our next speaker, who is Pat Shipley. Pat is originally from the town of Villisca in Adams County, and she is the mayor of the town of Nottoway, population 114, according to the resource I looked up. She's a past labor director who worked at a field office for the Iowa State Education Association. She's been a founding member of several movements in Southwest Iowa, including the Indivisible Movement, the We the People Book Club, the Red Shoes Group. She is currently engaged with the Interfaith Alliance and is a stated clerk at the Presbytery of Missouri River Valley. Pat is an authoritative voice for Iowa Democrats and is frequently featured in with letters to the editor and opinion columns across Southwest Iowa publications. Pat's insight into labor and education is second to none. I got to meet her right on the front lines at a labor rally for defending collective bargaining rights, which were stripped away by our 2017 legislature. She is an inspiration, and I'm really looking forward to hear what Pat has to share with us.
Well, thanks, Glenn. I had to do a little bit of research this afternoon, but just to give you a little bit about me, I taught for 16 years and I was a labor rep for 26 years. So that tells you something. I served on the ISEA executive board as a local leader, and I also served on the NEA, National Education Association Board of Directors, representing Iowa in the late 80s. So some of this stuff I've been swimming around in since the 80s. I went back. Public education has been under assault since 1980. So my main message to everyone right now is elections have consequences. The first assault began in 1980s with Ronald Reagan and an assault on the unions, because the unions, first of all, I'll get to 1980. Reagan, one of the first things he did was to reduce the federal aid budget for schools by 30%. He proposed to do that. In 1981 was when the air traffic controllers went on strike, and he eliminated that. I mean, he caused a huge issue with the unions. That was when unions suddenly had a bad name. My dad was a union member. He was a Teamster. Then the next thing that got really into the weeds with education was the Nation at Risk in 1983. I remember as a teacher, it was like a punch to my gut. Suddenly teachers were blamed for everything that was wrong in society. We were the worst people possible. We couldn't be trusted. We were trying to brainwash children. It was devastating. And it was at that point that the assault on education was to divert public money to vouchers, to private education, to let's get these kids into these better schools that are private schools. That continued into the 90s. with the diverting of public money into private schools, or the attempt. Then the next really bright spot was in 2002 with No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was fondly referred to by teachers as No Teacher Left Standing, because it was very early on in that whole situation. It became blatantly clear. I remember sitting at a staff meeting and having Judy Jeffries, who at that time was the head of the Department of Education in Iowa, explain to us how No Child Left Behind would work. We had goals that had to be achieved over a period of time, or the school district was going to be at risk. It was very clear from the very beginning, because Iowa was such a high-performing state, all our schools would be ultimately at risk and deemed so, and consequently have penalties. Interestingly enough, there's a couple of names that have come through all the way clear from the 80s. There's these guys called the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers were involved in the 1980s. The Koch brothers and the Waltons were involved in the assault on education. The Mercers were involved in the assault on education. They were billionaires who were trying to apply a business model to redesign schools, bringing in CEOs, superintendents who had no education background, but were going to turn the schools around. That's also what gave rise to a little group called ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council. And it was created to provide model language to legislatures. You can find some of this nasty stuff that's happened in Iowa has gone from state to state to state to state. And let me tell you a couple of the alumni of ALEC. These are kind of fun. Okay, so a few of the alumni are Mike Pence, Terry Branstad, Joni Ernst, Kim Reynolds, Corey Gardner, Lindsey. Current leadership is Linda Upmeyer, who has served in the Iowa State Legislature, and the two state chairs of Iowa are Iowa Senator Jason Schultz and Representative John Wills. So that kind of gives you a flavor of the depth of ALEC and how endemic it has been in Iowa. So then let's talk about how elections have consequences. The Iowa Collective Bargaining Law was passed in 1974 by Republican House and Senate in Iowa and signed by a Republican governor by the name of Robert Ray. And the initiative for that was to make sure that teachers and public employees could not strike. Interestingly enough, embedded in that law are these words: the General Assembly declares that it is the public policy of the state to promise harmonious and cooperative relationships between government and its employees by permitting public employees to organize and bargain collectively. I spent 26 years of my life bargaining with local teachers and support staff and community college. And AEAs. So I worked the whole gambit of the education community. And also, because we gave up the right to strike to get arbitration, binding arbitration, we still can't strike because they left that piece in the law. But Iowa, just so you know, anytime you hear some other kind of baloney, Iowa is a right to work state and always has been. We were an anomaly in the country that we were the only right to work state that had the kind of bargaining law that we had until 2017. My life changed the morning I woke up at about on the night of the election 2016. I was so down, I went to bed and I woke up just in time to hear that Mike Gronstall had been defeated. I knew at that very moment that all my life was going to change. It would change dramatically. I went out into local, and I had told folks, we can't lose the Senate. We have to save the Senate because Mike was our goalie. And I had teachers and people say, oh no, they won't hurt us. They're our friends. And I said, you watch, we're going to lose collective bargaining. I had that conversation with my state senator, and some of you can figure out who that might be. And I said, you're going to eliminate collective bargaining. Oh no, it had been in their platform, in the Republican platform for years, for probably 15 years at least, to eliminate collective bargaining. So on February 8th, 2017, the changes to collective bargaining were proposed in the Iowa legislature. I read the entire bill when it dropped, and I emailed my daughter and I said the bill dropped, and her response back to me, oh yes, my daughter is a teacher, by the way, in Nebraska. And she said, how bad is it, Mom? And I said, it's apocalyptic. And 9 days later, they passed it, and the next day the governor signed it, and it was implemented immediately upon signing. That is the only bill I know of. And I watch legislative bills, and I read them. I'm kind of weird. I actually read bills. And that is the only one in my lifetime up to that point that was implemented upon signing. And we were in the middle of the bargaining process. It was probably some of the worst days of my life. And it was the worst days of many teachers' lives because they lost, and not just teachers, any public employee that was unionized in Iowa. So it's not just about teachers, it's about all the public labor unions. We lost all kinds of ways to bargain insurance, to bargain coverage, to bargain salary schedules, to bargain evaluation, staff reductions, seniority, safety, if you want to, that's a big piece right now, that's gone. So there was a whole lot of stuff that happened there very quickly. And, you know, that's the piece that's going to haunt me forever from the standpoint that elections do matter. Platform language matters. And that's the piece that we have to be aware of. When you talk to your friends and colleagues, ask them if they've read the platform for the two parties. That we did that little exercise in a training session in the Uniserve unit one time. We laid both platforms out without them being labeled. Because when we worked with educators, we knew that we were a third. So when people say diss teachers about not voting in their best interest, I knew that anytime I stood up in front of a group of teachers, 66% of them probably didn't vote the way I did. So I had to walk that line. But it was very interesting to just lay those two platforms, just education alone, just the education platform. Okay, which one is pro-education and which one is not? And we had some interesting conversations, and it was very telling. I want to just say a little bit about unions, because I do think, particularly in rural areas, organized labor has been bastardized. Organized labor was there to equalize. It was there about equity. It was put in place about equal pay. It was put in there for equal treatment. Organized labor was put there for equity, for process, that everyone has the same process. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, what your background is, they'll treat you the same way. And it was about safety and regulations. Think what might have happened in the meatpacking plants if they had been unionized. Just saying, we would not have the mess that we have right now. So I've you know, the whole union piece and education piece, and to set something straight so that y'all know, teachers get paid for 9 months of, they do get paid for 9 months of work, paid over 12 months. You know why they did that? So teachers could not get unemployment during the summer. That's why they were paid out over 12 months. So it's, it's deferred compensation. and that's not something that's very well known. So I'm just, yeah. Education. The other piece is we're going to see, sadly, and this is again, elections have consequences. We've already seen a diminishment of licensure. So just beware. Tell your friends and neighbors, it matters. Elections matter. So vote Democrat.
Thank you. I don't think the hammer could have come down any more solidly on the nail. It's absolutely shameful what has happened to teachers and to our labor movement as part of that collective bargaining structure was decimated, and the important part of that in terms of rural, you really hit on that. Those are rural jobs. Those are schools are big employers in counties and communities, and when you aren't able to negotiate a base salary, or beyond a base salary, when you can't bargain for your own benefits, why would you stay in that community? So it's loss of people in the community, it's loss of it's brain drain in that community. It's why we see schools having to consolidate and communities lose their schools. And again, when we lose our schools, it's like when we lose our hospitals and when we lose our independent farmers, our communities stop growing. They actually begin shrinking, and rural America disappears. Rural Iowa ends as we know it. There's not much better voice to talk to wrap us up regarding Iowa and the rural issues in Iowa. John Norris is obviously most recently recognized as a Democratic candidate for the Iowa governor in the 2018 race, and the one who raised rural issues to the top of the debate. He was raised on the Montgomery County family farm that his great-great-grandparents settled in 1881. John's benefited from a strong family, close-knit rural community, and world-class Iowa education. He served as the chief of staff for Governor Vilsack and USDA Secretary Vilsack, as well as several key positions in the Obama administration. Iowa's values motivate him: love for the land, hard work, frugality, caring for neighbors, and passion for justice for all in the community. John Norris, please guide us to victory.
Thank you, Glenn. Someone must have sent you my intro material from my governor's race there. Hey, thanks everybody. And I've like jiggered with my remarks about 12 times, listened to you and Denise and Pat speak. But I gotta admit, it's a bit of a bleak picture, but I'm hopeful. Let me do a couple of housekeeping things first. If you saw me go off the screen there for a while, Denise, I wore this for you. Local food. And I was helping get the boys are coming home from wrestling practice pretty soon, so I was getting the bacon ready for the oven, and they're going to get fresh tomatoes from the garden I picked tonight and fresh greens I picked from my garden tonight. So we're doing our best to do local foods in the Norris household. And just so you know, Iowa children are 50th in the nation in consumption of fruit and vegetables. We are in the heartland of America, the richest soil on the planet, and we're last in the country of our children that eat fruits and vegetables. We are one of the most obese states in the nation, and it's because we have lost connection to the land and what it can provide for us. Another housekeeping thing. I just read in the paper this morning, and we're talking about rural Iowa and rural Democrats tonight, that Bob Bell just passed away. And so if anybody who knows Bob, or from certainly Madison County Democrats, my heart goes out to all of you. And I think of just the classic rural Iowa Democrat that cared passionately about what we care about. Bob was that, and so it was sad for me to see that in this morning's paper. And let's see here. Before I go into my other remarks, I told Glenn this the other night, You know, every election cycle, you hear people running for office saying, this is the most important election of my lifetime, right? Yeah, that's not what I'm saying this time. I'm more concerned this could be the last election of my lifetime. And that's what worries me. That's truly how high the stakes are this cycle with what these guys are trying to do and the erosion of our democracy. And Pat, you touched on it with Koch brothers. This has been a strategy that is just coming to a head, because the strategy from the Koch brothers and so many right-wing and corporate influence on American politics has been to erode our public's faith in their government. Because if you erode the public's faith in our government, that empowers the rich and powerful. Because our power is in our vote. And we have to, and that's why I encourage everyone on this call tonight, do all you can, 4 weeks. This has got to be grassroots. We have got to reconnect with people. The whole industry is now in this grass tops. Well, grass tops is made for people with money that can pay people to try and influence people at the top. And that's why this erosion in faith in government is part of their strategy. The way we beat that is connecting with people. And so we truly have to connect, especially in rural Iowa, with connecting with people about why this matters and why we're going to fight for their future. So that will lead me to a little bit of criticism of Democrats. For too long, our not just Democrat candidates, but candidates for office equate being for rural America with being for ethanol, or being for farm subsidies, or being for crop insurance. There is so much more vote in rural Iowa and rural America than just the farm vote. But that's become the symbolism. If you're for ethanol, you must be for rural Iowa. No, I'm not saying I'm for or against ethanol. I'm just saying we have to have a vision for rural Iowa that will connect with people that those issues will connect with. And there's not too many people out there. If you look at the population of rural Iowa, and a minority of them are farmers, and a minority of those farmers depend upon ethanol. Again, this isn't to knock ethanol. It's just we have to have a broader message of a vision for rural Iowa. And it has to reflect the things that Pat and Glenn and Denise have talked about. It's to have a successful rural economy, you have to have the infrastructure of schools, healthcare, and agriculture that reconnects people with the land. That's why I'm such a believer in the local foods movement and healthy soils. And honestly, I think climate change might save agriculture, even though it may be our biggest threat. When Joe Biden, I wasn't for Biden in the caucuses, but I'm 100% behind him now. It's just because we have to have that change for the sake of our democracy. But I really think he understands it. Now, when on the caucus campaign, he spent a long time at Matt Russell's farm out in Marion County. I trust anybody in this, Matt, as much as anybody in this. Biden listened. And he gets the role that agriculture and farmers can play in sequestering carbon. He also gets the connection to water quality and soil health from treating our soil appropriately. And so I think if we can shift that focus on the agricultural side to compensating farmers for conservation and sequestering carbon, that will do so much in terms of job creation in rural Iowa and changing the structure of agriculture just by that measure alone. And we get away from rewarding farmers to overproduce and compensate them for providing conservation and environmental services. And Joe Biden gets that. So I just want to encourage everyone, listen, has he been the cheerleader for the Green New Deal? No, but he understands it. And he's talked to folks, and John Kerry and AOC were the co-chairs of setting up his climate committee, and they both get it. And so I must want to encourage folks. I'm excited about the opportunity and his openness to seeing a vision for rural Iowa and agriculture that's different than we have now. But we have to have a broader vision than just agriculture, even though I think the growth sector on our farm side is obviously going to come from expanding opportunities for diversified agriculture and local foods production. I think that the millennials and earlier and younger generations really have a desire to reconnect with the land and their food. And we have to make sure rural communities have healthcare and good schools and access to broadband if we want to attract them and provide them the opportunity to get engaged in food production. And I really believe that's a vision for rural Iowa that is real. And you pair that with the role in sequestering carbon and restoring soil health. There's a future there that people can get excited about. But we've got to talk to rural Iowans about a vision of changing the dynamics and changing the economy in rural Iowa. You know, and Pat talked about it. We build an industrial base in rural Iowa. Really, Terry Branstad started this in the 80s, of selling rural Iowa as a place to put light manufacturing and industrial, because you had a lot of farm kids that weren't going into farming, but they were great at mechanics, right? And they were problem solvers. And then we took advantage of them by selling them on non-union jobs so they could get cheaper labor in rural Iowa and rural America. It was only a matter of time before those same jobs and the same companies that wanted cheaper labor were going to find the next cheap labor source, and that was overseas. And I think Trump tapped into that in 2016. And that's why I think Biden's on the right mark here about truly, honestly trying to address the jobs in America and union jobs and quality jobs in America. And because when I got out of high school in 1980, you made as much at the packing plant in Oakland, Iowa, as people make today, not in real dollars, in actual dollars. And so we have to create economic opportunity in rural Iowa. And I think it's through, on the ag side, local foods, reconnecting with the land, repurposing and rewarding conservation and ecological services, and not overproduction, and not backfilling with taxpayer subsidies to support that non-sustainable agricultural system. And then it's broadband access, schools, healthcare, and for gosh sake, supporting a minimum wage that's above $7.25 an hour. Because right now in rural Iowa, about half the babies born in rural Iowa are born eligible for Medicaid. Think about that. About half the babies born in rural Iowa are born into poverty. And that has got to change. But it changed by supporting Medicaid so they get healthcare services and dental services and can have a quality of life and have a chance to succeed. And then it has to be about union wage jobs and a minimum, raising that minimum wage to $15 an hour, so you can live a quality life in rural Iowa at those kind of wages. But we're not providing that. So as Democrats, we have to have that vision that's going to provide the economic opportunity in rural Iowa. And it's raising wages, healthcare, education, and broadband and technology access. And that can help build an infrastructure that can rejuvenate rural Iowa. And so if you're talking to Democratic candidates, we still have some work to do, because their consultants are from the same DC consultants that advise every other US Senate and congressional campaign and presidential campaign. Well, let's see, you got to talk about ethanol. You got to talk about support for farmers and more subsidies and disaster assistance. And that's how you win the rural vote. That's not how you win the rural vote. And that's why we haven't won the rural vote, because we don't have a broader vision for rural Iowa that includes all those building blocks for a successful economy. And so we have to hold our own candidates' feet accountable for that and educate them, so they're not just listen to the consultants in DC that'll tell them the talking points and what their poll told them. Their polls aren't testing vision. They're testing just top line lines to use. And so we have to work on creating a deeper understanding in our own party about what a vision, what rural Iowa can look like. And then if they get that vision and can talk about it, we can actually get folks excited. And I think win back votes in rural Iowa and rural America as Democrats. And we have to sustain control of the Senate, win the presidency, and create the future we're looking for. Let me glance at my notes here and see what I missed that I might have wanted to share with you.
Well, and John, if you had anything that you thought was pertinent related to immigration or energy, two topics that we didn't really hit on, but that really cover all three of these areas. I mean, they play imperative roles in how we use labor, what farming looks like, and what the medical field looks like.
For all of you viewing, that was Glenn getting a big boot up to the side of my head there for not mentioning energy, which is my passion area. It is. I mean, renewable energy is part of that mix of a successful rural economy. And we're missing the boat in Iowa. We've got great wind development. There's going to be more wind development. There's solar development. It's going to expand. And one of my projects I'm working on is expanding the electric grid so we can accommodate all this renewable energy. But those are good quality jobs, certainly address climate change. But we've got to get rural Iowans to recognize, and we're not so far, utilizing those resources that they create in our tax base. Wind and solar are the gas and oil, what gas and oil are to Oklahoma. And you go to rural communities in Oklahoma, and they've built libraries and schools and great public infrastructure through revenues from gas and oil. We're not taking advantage of our revenues from the tax revenues from wind in this state. We're just absorbing it into our county budget, largely going to reduce or keep down ag land property taxes. Think about if we start talking about wind farms providing free childcare for everyone in Adair County, or Cass County, or Pottawatomie County. Wow. I mean, that can benefit me. We should be taking advantage of these new resources, be it solar and wind, that provide in property tax base. And in some counties, it's multi-million dollars a year that just the wind farms provide in property tax revenue. So each county should be thinking about, okay, how can we change our trajectory? If we want to attract young people here and create jobs here, wow, why don't we offer free childcare to everyone in our county? And the wind turbines can pay for that in a heartbeat. If you have any significant wind turbines in your county at all, they could pay for free childcare in your county, or they could fund essential healthcare services in the hospitals. Probably both, but we're not being imaginative about that new resource opportunity. So that's, and I'm not sure what has to happen legislatively, but I'm pretty sure counties right now could do an exercise where you got a wind farm coming in. We know exactly, we can calculate out exactly over the next 20 years what that's going to provide in property taxes. Sure, use some of it for property tax relief, but use some of it as this is a one-time windfall to change the trajectory of your county and invest in healthcare and education and economic development in your county and job training skills so that you can attract higher wage jobs.
Yeah, I think
I'll stop there. I could go on all night. So
no, I think questions. People, the motivator for people is, at the drugstore counter level, is what's it going? What is that party? What is that person who's running for office? What value are they going to add to my family and to my farm and my community? And if we can't talk about that, what value is added, we can talk about how much we care about, uncovered health care in children until it affects our pocketbook. And then, then we don't want to talk about it. But, if we can talk about, here's how we're going to help you, and in helping you, we're helping everyone. I think that's an important way to frame these conversations. I know we've gone over time a little bit, but normally people start jumping off as soon as they're bored with us. And we still have every person that we started with, just about every person that we started with on this meeting. So I'm looking really quickly at questions. I'm going to be respectful of our panelists' time. Thank them for coming, but I'm looking to just see if anything else jumps on here. And I'm not seeing anything. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up. I really do want to thank each one of you, Denise, Pat, John. You're busy people doing a lot in your community and a lot in the state, and I'm grateful for you taking time to educate all of us. And this information is going to be on our Facebook page, and we will be back here on November 10th or 11th with a Veterans Forum. Invite you all to come back. Again, thank you to Jackie Steiber-Cordone, Judy Kading, and Vicki Rossander for organizing the forums for us. We're so blessed to have you. Everybody get out there and talk to at least 3 other Democrats, find out when they're going to vote, how they're going to go, where they're going to vote, and make sure they follow up and make sure they do it. Glad to see all of you. And again, thank you very much and have a good, safe night.